Mr. President, welcome back to your 12th appearance on Meet the Press.
Great to see you.
Thanks for doing this. We start with a very basic question. Are you preparing the country to go back to war?
I'm preparing the country to make sure that we deal with a threat from ISIL. Keep in mind, this is something that we know how to do. We've been dealing with terrorist threats for quite some time. This administration has systematically dismantled al-Qaeda and the Fatah. ISIL poses a broader threat because of its territorial ambitions in Iraq and Syria. But the good news is, coming back from the most recent NATO meeting, is the entire international community understands that this is something that has to be dealt with. So what I have done over the last several months is, first and foremost, make sure that we got eyes on the problem, that we shifted resources, intelligence, reconnaissance. We did an assessment on the ground. The second step was to make sure that we protected American personnel, our embassies, our consulates. That included taking airstrikes to ensure that towns like Erbil were not overrun, critical infrastructure like the Mosul Dam was protected, and that we were able to engage in key humanitarian assistance programs that have saved thousands of lives. The next phase is now to start going on some offense. We have to get an Iraqi government in place, and I'm optimistic that next week we should be able to get that done. And I meet with congressional leaders on Tuesday. On Wednesday, I'll make a speech and describe what our game plans are going to be going forward. But this is not going to be an announcement about U.S. ground troops. This is not the equivalent of the Iraq War. What this is similar to the kinds of counterterrorism campaigns that we've been engaging in consistently over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And the good news is that because of American leadership, we have, I believe, a broad-based coalition internationally and regionally to be able to deal with the problem.
What are you asking of the American people on Wednesday? You say you're giving a speech. That's the type of thing, I assume, you're preparing the country for something. What are you asking of them?
More than anything, I just want the American people to understand the nature of the threat and how we're going to deal with it, and to have confidence that we'll be able to deal with it.
You realize you're giving that speech the day before the 13th anniversary of 9/11.
But right, and I want everybody to understand that we have not seen any immediate intelligence about threats to the homeland from ISIL. That's not what this is about. What it's about is an organization that, if allowed to control significant amounts of territory, to amass more resources, more arms, to attract more foreign fighters, including from areas like Europe, who have Europeans who have visas and then can travel to the United States unimpeded, that over time that can be a serious threat to the homeland. So what I'm going to be asking the American people to understand is, number one, this is a serious threat. Number two, we have the capacity to deal with it. Here's how we're going to deal with it. I am going to be asking Congress to make sure that they understand and support what our plan is. And it's going to require some resources, I suspect, above what we are currently doing.
This is asking Congress for a vote, an authorization of your strategy. This is not a, what does that mean?
Well,
Define that.
I'm confident that I've got the authorization that I need to protect the American people. And I'm always going to do what's necessary to protect the American people. But I do think it's important for Congress to understand what the plan is, to have buy-in, to debate it. And that's why we've been consulting with Congress throughout. This speech will allow Congress, I think, to understand very clearly and very specifically what it is that we are doing, but also what we're not doing. We're not looking at sending in 100,000 American troops. We are going to be, as part of an international coalition, carrying out airstrikes in support of work on the ground by Iraqi troops, Kurdish troops. We are going to be helping to put together a plan for them so that they can start retaking territory that ISIL had taken over. What I want people to understand, though, is that over the course of months, we are going to be able to not just blunt the momentum of ISIL, we are going to systematically degrade their capabilities. We're going to shrink the territory that they control, and ultimately we're going to defeat them.
Long way from when you described them as a JV team. Was that bad intelligence or your misjudgment?
Keep in mind, I wasn't specifically referring to ISIL. I've said that regionally, there were a whole series of organizations that were focused primarily locally, weren't focused on the homeland, because I think a lot of us, when we think about terrorism, the model is Osama bin Laden and 9/11. And the point that I was...
You don't believe these people...
Not yet, but they can evolve. And I was very specific at that time. What I said was, not every regional terrorist organization is automatically a threat to us that would call for a major offensive. Our goal should not be to think that we can occupy every country where there is a terrorist organization.
You've not said the word Syria so far in our conversation. Obviously, if you're going to defeat ISIS, you have used very much stronger language. It's gone through the week during your trip to Wales. You got to go to Syria in some form or another. You've ruled out boots on the ground. And I'm curious, have you only ruled them out simply for domestic political reasons, or is there another reason you've ruled out American boots on the ground? Because your own guys have said you can't defeat ISIS with airstrikes alone.
Well, they're absolutely right about that. But you also cannot, over the long term or even the medium term, deal with this problem by having the United States serially occupy various countries all around the Middle East. We don't have the resources. It puts enormous strains on our military, and at some point we leave, and then things blow up again.
Well, that's what happened with Iraq.
So we've got to have a more sustainable strategy, which means the boots on the ground have to be Iraqi.
What about in Syria?
And in Syria, the boots on the ground have to be Syrian, and that's why.
Who?
Well, we have a Free Syrian Army and a moderate opposition that we have steadily been working with, that we have vetted. They have been on the defensive, not just from ISIL, but also from the Assad regime. The strategy, both for Iraq and for Syria, is that we will hunt down ISIL members and assets wherever they are. I will reserve the right to always protect the American people and go after folks who are trying to hurt us wherever they are. But in terms of controlling territory, we're going to have to develop a moderate Sunni opposition that can control territory and that would. The notion that the United States should be putting boots on the ground, I think, would be a profound mistake, and I want to be very clear and very explicit about it.
I got a somewhat snarky email from a casual viewer who said, the United States gives a lot of military aid to Saudi Arabia. It's about time they use it. What do you say to them?
Well, I think that it is absolutely true that we're going to need Sunni states to step up. Not just Saudi Arabia, our partners like Jordan, United Arab Emirates, Turkey. They need to be involved. This is their neighborhood. The dangers that are posed are more directed at them right now than they are us. And the good news is, I think, for perhaps the first time, you have absolute clarity that the problem for Sunni states in the region, many of whom are our allies, is not simply Iran. It's not simply a Sunni-Shia issue. Sunni extremism, as represented by ISIL, is the biggest danger that they face right now.
Assad, are we essentially putting aside that priority that Assad must go because ISIS is a more direct threat?
You know, the reason we're in this situation is because Assad brutalized his people and specifically brutalized a Sunni population that is the majority in Syria. It's going to be hard for us to attract Sunnis to fight against ISIL in this area if they think that we're doing it on behalf of Assad. So our attitude towards Assad continues to be that through his actions, through using chemical weapons on his own people, dropping barrel bombs that kill innocent children, that he has foregone legitimacy. But when it comes to our policy and the coalition that we're putting together, our focus specifically is on ISIL.
Part one of my interview